right.
All right. Well, greetings, everybody. I hope y'all can hear us. Give us a little smile. We can see your faces. Excellent. Great. If you can't, there should be a little button in the bottom left-hand corner where you can monitor both your video as well as your audio. We'd love to have the videos on. It gives a sense of actually being able to see each other's faces.
Who's in our virtual room?
Our virtual room.
Hey.
So we're really grateful you all took the time to join us today. We do every year a series of open houses, and it's an opportunity to both explore a little bit about what the program's about, meet people face to face in this virtual environment, get a sense of a little bit about how some of the virtual technology works, and just talk a little bit about the spirit of the program.
Yeah.
So what we'd love to do, we often use the chat box function, especially when we get a good crew of folks here. So maybe if you wouldn't mind just dropping into the chat box function and let us know your name and where you're dialing in from today. Would be fabulous.
If you can't find the chat box, if you hover over the screen with all the videos, you should be able to see a little button called chat that pulls it up. Hey, Ray.
Northern Virginia.
Melody, when you dialed in, you turned on your video and we just saw your knees.
Alberta.
Hanover, Vermont, Portland, Oregon.
Hi, Emma.
Yeah.
Hi, Jody, too. All your faces are popping up in different orders in our screen.
And Liz from Portland, Oregon, from the West Coast.
Awesome.
2 West Coasters.
Fabulous.
Yeah.
Well, we thought what we would do today for this open house is spend a little bit of time just introducing ourselves in the program, giving a brief overview of some of the program structure, and then making some space for some conversation. Any questions you might have, concerns. Oftentimes the conversation is most generative when we can respond to the kinds of issues and questions that are alive for each of you. So we thought we would maybe start by introducing ourselves. Who's going first?
I'm not.
Two Trees and I usually play rock, paper, scissors to see who has to go first, and I usually lose. So maybe Emil can go first.
That's actually the pattern, isn't it? That I always fall to the bottom. Sure, I'll briefly introduce myself. Hi, everyone. It's nice to meet you. For those who I haven't talked to yet, I've talked to a couple, but it's great to see all of you. My name is Emil. I'm the program coordinator for the Leadership for Sustainability program. I've been involved since the very inception of the program 3+ years ago. Prior to that, I was a graduate student in Rubenstein. I was in the field of environmental humanities and did a lot of field work and ethnographic research on climate change scientists. Now, as the coordinator for the program, I work with these two day in and day out, as well as a lot of the other team members who help out in various capacities with the program. But my involvement is really around a lot of coaching and online engagement, and I'm at the residentials and really engaged with students constantly and listening to feedback and helping to support and steward all of the wisdom of the professional affiliates that are also linked to the program that you also hear a little bit about. I guess the other thing that I'll briefly mention is that I do moonlight as a PhD student when I have all my abundant extra time from outside of this program, and I'm looking at playfulness and emergence and sovereignty and leadership are the things that I'm really passionate about in my doctoral work. That's a little bit about me.
That's good.
Thanks.
I always love listening to. It's like we learn each other all over again. Introductions are a big part of our world, actually.
You look like you're about to go next.
I guess I am.
Go for it.
So I'm Kaylin Sullivan, Two Trees, and I'm artist in residence and a member of the leadership team. And my role is really to be involved in the curriculum, both online and in the residentials, to do coaching, to really foster and explore the relationships we have with the affiliates networks, and to really build beefy relationships so that we can really, that wisdom and practice is really available to both the program and to you as students. And the things that I'm really focused on in the program are as through lines, kind of as continuous threads, are the use of creativity in leadership, and how that can catalyze resilience and change, and also how we work across really broad cultural divides in order to be in radical reciprocity and deep solidarity with one another for a future that sustains us all. And I've been with the program since it started.
Before that.
Yeah, I've been with the program when it was a thought in the mind. And Matt and I have been working together for many years before the program started. I think that's it. That's enough for the minute.
Well, I get to go last today. So my name is Matt Colin. I've talked to many of you. Technically, I'm the program director, but that's really the administrative title that the academic institution gives to me. It feels like my job is really much more a job that's about stewardship. So much of the impulse of this program was born out of the inspiration and calling to try and create a learning ecosystem that is really vibrant and serves the unique, differentiated, unique potential of everybody who's part of that. And that doesn't just include students, it includes staff and faculty and administration team and professional affiliates. And my day-to-day, I spend a lot of time with these two, and that is an enormous joy, the kind of creative way in which we're constantly trying to apply the very same principles and practices that are at the core of this program to how we be together every single day. And we've also said from the very beginning, and this part doesn't necessarily show up on our website, but we want everything that we do together to be circled up around 4 core values. And those core values are learning, relationship, well-being, and love. And we believe that no effort to participate in any kind of change-making effort will be successful if we're not embodying those same internal conditions that we want to create in the world. And so a big part of, it feels like my job is to just continuously try to realign with everything we do, from building budget spreadsheets to designing week-long residential experiences in DC, to having the opportunity to be on an open house call with you all. Those are the 4 principles that are sort of at the center. So that's a little bit about who each of us are. And we've got a little PowerPoint presentation actually that we thought we would share to just give you a quick overview of some of the structure and intentions of the program. That'll probably be about 10 minutes. And then we just love to hear from you, any questions that you might have. You're welcome to pop any questions you have into the chat box as we go, but you're also welcome to just hang on to them and we can have a more open-ended and spirited conversation at the end. Yeah, you can just pop through that. So part of the impulse of this particular program is born out of a calling to a higher aspiration. And we've relanguaged this many times, and it feels like this is kind of a finger that points to what we have as an aspiration for this program. Creating conditions for life to thrive over the long haul. And this aspiration can be kind of found as an imperative that life has. So, evolutionary ecologists might suggest that life's imperative is to create conditions for life to thrive. It's not just about being able to pass along their own genes to the next generation, but it's also about creating conditions so that life can manifest in a healthy way over the long haul. And so all the leadership practices that we're exploring are in service to this intention.
And it's clear we mean more than human life.
That's right. This is not a human-centric program, and a big piece of what we're after is how to decenter human exceptionalism in our leadership efforts. So we love this quote that points to this dynamic that's often present in the Western world. The major problems of the world are the result of the difference between the way nature works and how people think. So we're interested in a realignment process that recognizes the more than human neighbors. Right now I'm actually looking out the window and there's this huge flock of crows that are getting together and they're about to head to their winter roosting site. There's a bunch of sites around Burlington. 3,000-4,000 crows will roost together every single night. And how many times we've heard on the radio or on a new article that comes out about how crows have now been discovered to have the intelligence of a 7-year-old because they can use tools, right? Well, these crows have existed on this planet for far longer than humans have. And so we're really interested in tapping into the sources of the wisdom of nature, thinking about the crows as our older kin, as one of our affiliates, Robin Wall-Kimmerer, describes it, and listening to what it means to be in relationship and realign our practices with the way nature works. Another way of saying this is that so many leadership decisions follow cultural norms, rules, and values rather than ecological principles or the laws of nature. So we spend a lot of time thinking about what it looks like to try and embody the principles of differentiation, interdependence, self-organization in everything that we do. And we're trying to move from a leadership model that thinks about leadership as domination and control and management to a leadership practice that's really born out of the root word of lead, which means to sprout forth. And so in the spirit of this, we're thinking about everyone has the capacity to step into their own unique potential, their own inner genius, to be part of a healthy system where they can thrive and where all life can thrive around them. So we do have a few leadership goals. We've already alluded to one, leadership inspired by the wisdom of nature. We don't just try and take a scientific approach to this. We're interested in relational ways to be inspired by the wisdom of nature. And we're not just about imitating patterns and processes. We're actually about being in relationship with sources of wisdom that are inherent in all life around us. Do you want to say?
No, I think that we want to look at nature not always in comparison to humans, but actually in comparison to itself, with us as a detail of that. Mm-hmm. And so that shifts the perspective of how we're thinking about the wisdom of nature as something that can be informative and guiding for us.
There's also a lot of work that's happening out there around language related to biomimicry and other kinds of ecological principles that often try to harness ecological principles in service to human needs. And we're trying to, again, decenter humans as what we're talking about here, but really talk about life writ large. And life not necessarily the way scientists define it either, but life in the living. And sentience that might exist throughout the universe. So that's one goal, leadership inspired by the wisdom of nature. Going hand in hand with that is the idea of challenging structures of domination and oppression. This is really an unlearning process and a recognition of the fact that in so much of the Western world, we're swimming in norms that are baked in colonialism, in white supremacy, and in systems of domination and oppression. And that without deep consciousness and critical inquiry, we're likely to continue to reinforce and perpetuate some of those same patterns in the work that we do. And so this is a major focus of our program. We often use this cultural iceberg metaphor to point to the fact that a huge part of the first year of our program is designed to take us as far down into the iceberg of our own consciousness as we possibly can. Most educational programs often focus on trying to shift behavior, and behavior is the part of the iceberg that's visible, and that education usually looks like creating rewards and punishments and incentives to get people to change how they're behaving. But what we know about that is as soon as you remove the incentive, the belief and mindset and worldview and cosmology that gives rise to that behavior will return. And while that behavior might shift slightly, other behaviors that are reflective of ideologies of dominance are likely to perpetuate themselves if we don't get after those. And so our first year is a deep dive to really examining what our mindsets are, what are our unconscious beliefs, what's the cosmology, the belief in what exists and doesn't exist that even makes our worldview possible, and what are other possibilities that align more deeply with who we are and what we want in the world.
And this work is really focused on really, we can have really amazingly good and lofty intentions about the work and the change we want to do in the world, but without examining some of our pre-existing and invisible assumptions and preconceptions that come from our cosmologies and worldviews and perspectives and mindsets, it's hard to know that we're not recreating the very conditions that we're trying to change. And so this examination is allowing us to actually try to be clearer about what it is we're bringing to the field.
Yeah, and I think going under the iceberg like that, looking at the assumptions, actually in turn allows the inquiry into behavior to happen much more intentionally and much more quicker, because you can actually see under all the actions and habits that constitutes a lifestyle, sort of what undergirds that, what are the underlying ideologies that one might not even be aware of.
So I will also just say that the first year of the program, and we'll talk more about the structure in a moment, is an invitation to the examination of what's deep underneath the iceberg, which can be an unsettling process for all of us, and not just for the participants in this experience, that we believe in the power of that deep inquiry and doing that relationally with relationships with the more than human world. And we name that because there's an invitation to really come with an open heart to this, and a willingness to ask some of those questions. And I will also just say, without the idea, we are not trying to replace one mindset with another. There is not a leadership for sustainability ideology that we're trying to hand everybody. There's not a recipe. There's not a new belief system that we're offering. But we believe in asking questions that reveal more so that we can find our center more fully in a differentiated way. So we're actually interested in a 2-year program and a lifelong relationship that's going to allow each person to differentiate into their own mindsets and beliefs that are most fully aligned with who they are. Which is the perfect lead into our last goal, which is supporting and fostering unique potential. We engage with a series of leadership practices that include things like awareness practice and practicing personal sovereignty, systems thinking, building relationship, working across difference and with ambiguity and tension. These are the practices that we've found through both ourselves, but also with this network of many, many professional affiliates have named as the most transformative practices that they can use to find their center and live a life that's on purpose and in alignment with who they want to be. And so this is this idea of the spirit of differentiation. We're not trying to create an education where everyone is going to be tested on the same outcomes. Our curriculum is actually organized around essential questions more so than learning outcomes, because essential questions allow us to be able to respond to those questions differently and lead to new questions, whereas learning outcomes suggest that everybody learn all the same things. We do have some learning outcomes, certainly. We're trying to balance those two things, but we're trying to create a learning ecosystem that fosters differentiation, not assimilation. The last thing I'll just say here is the wisdom of this program is really born out of the relationships with the professional affiliates who are the inspiration for, and the teachers and the coaches of so much of the curriculum. And these are many of our core affiliates who some of us have been in relationship for many years. These are individuals who are practicing leadership that is born out of these very same 3 goals, and who are embodying the kind of internal conditions that align with love, well-being, deep personal sovereignty, learning and openness, and relationship. And I could tell you stories about every single one of these brilliant people who are on the screen. We have deep affection for these teachers and affiliates who are part of this program.
And I would say that not only are they deep practitioners, that many of them are also theoreticians, but in ways that inform their practice. And I would say that they are also catalysts for change. Mm-hmm. So that the combination of that in embodied form is kind of the meat and the glue of the network of relationships of the program.
Mm-hmm. I think that piece is so critical. You articulated this actually for the first time in really clear way recently, which is that all graduate programs are accountable to the university institution within which they sit, right? Which is going to ensure levels of academic rigor and certain learning outcomes associated with the program. Those are important things to us. But from the beginning, we also said, it's not enough just to be accountable to academic aspects of rigor. We also want to be accountable to the practitioners who are on the front lines of catalyzing change in their own home community. And so we actually, in just this last year, initiated a kind of, we still aren't sure what to call it.
The alignment team.
The alignment team, the integrity team, which are members of this these affiliate network, who we're asking to be mirrors to us, to make sure that what we're doing, from the nitty-gritty budgetary level to the core curriculum that we're offering, is in line with the spirits of solidarity, of deep relational practice, of love, of well-being. Yeah. And we're really interested in continuing to evolve this program every year to respond to how the world is changing, and to continue to be accountable to those who are most impacted by the changes that are happening across the planet. You want to take this one?
You're up.
Oh, yeah. So some of the more concrete program features, and I won't go into too much detail around these. I'd be glad to answer them either in the question and dialogue session at the end of this, or in a one-on-one. But I think it's worth mentioning some of the things that really differentiate this graduate program from others. The first is this low residency distance learning approach. A lot of what attracts students to our program is the ability to actually stay rooted in their home community and home organization while actually doing this program. We still try to balance face-to-face relational building time that's really deep and intentional with the online learning. So a key feature of the program are these week-long residential intensives that we have in Shelburne, Vermont, Washington, D.C., as well as the Bay Area, California. These are some photos of our students in Vermont, and these are some of our students in D.C. Those week-long residential experiences allow for a lot of time with the affiliates, a lot of time with your cohort and colleagues. And I'll just say that many of the students themselves have many, many years of professional experience and could very easily be professional affiliates in their own right. I think the average number of professional years of experience is 10 or 11 right now. So it's pretty awesome to be able to learn as a learning community as well. The other feature around this low residency approach is the online learning, and a lot of inquiries and applications come in that are really concerned with the online learning environment. And it was something that we put a lot of thought and intention into to try and figure a way that maintains our 4 key values as well as our principles in this. So some of the features that we use are Zoom, which you are experiencing right now. Zoom has this webinar feature that we're doing, but you can also do breakout rooms, which is really great for smaller discussion. We also do a lot of media making in this program, so a lot of really responsive videos, unlike other online programs where they try to like create videos and then save them for years at a time. We're making videos on a weekly basis to really respond to what's in the field. And then the last thing that I'll mention about the online learning is that it's not just content that you're digesting through readings and video, but a lot of them are actually applied and hands-on exercises, so that requires you to actually leave your computer and go out into your community and to actually be a little bit more engaged with your body, not just with your mind. And then the workload is another common question that comes up. And you might find these like exponential rises in other residential courses with a lit review or a paper, and we've tried to keep it really like a steady 6 to 8 hour work commitment a week, that you don't actually have to expect any ebbs and flows, so that you can manage a full-time job. And I would say maybe 2/3 of our students also have families too, so that's also a big part of it.
Yeah, if I could just jump in and say one thing. When we started the design of this program, we wanted to make sure that at the end of a 2-year program, that people weren't depleted from having done a 2-year graduate program in leadership for sustainability, because we believe that our quality of leadership is based on our ability to generate a sense of overflowing energy from which, an abundance from which we step into the world. And so we're really willing to be flexible as well with people who have different ebbs and flows in their work environment, because well-being is at the core of the kind of leadership that we want to see bring and brought into the world.
So one of the distinguishing features of the program too is this capstone project that you undertake in the second year. So as Matt mentioned, in the first year, you're doing a lot of deep under the iceberg work through our residentials and through our online courses. In the second year, there's a transition to actually thinking about the change that you want to manifest in the world. So change not just in your community, but also in yourself. And that happens through this capstone project process, which is undergirded and supported by many of the professional affiliates that you saw on that slide just a moment ago, who can serve as both through-line coaches who act as sort of primary mentors through the process, as well as specialty coaches that are available for one-on-one check-ins if like a specific question or need arises. And this capstone project, our students say, is like an amazing opportunity to actually embody and manifest all of the learnings that happen in the first year. And then I'll just briefly mention here too that in addition to the core curriculum around the leadership for sustainability and ecological leadership learnings, there are a few other areas of specialization that are available, both things that we offer as a program as well as other offerings at UVM. So we'll talk about these in a second, but there's education for sustainability, ecological economics, and agroecology.
So I'll just briefly say, those 3 tracks, there's actually a 4th one, which is called ecological leadership, which is like the general track. So if you think you want to try out a whole bunch of different things, you can choose ecological leadership, and you can try out a whole bunch of different electives in your 3-credit elective choice. If you want to concentrate in something, we have a track in education for sustainability, which Shandine Garcia is offering coursework around educational equity and how we can really repurpose and redesign educational systems in support of a future where life can flourish over the long haul. We have a lot of affiliates with deep educational experience and coursework to really help us think differently about learning and education. We also are affiliated with the Gund Institute for Ecological Economics. One of the faculty members associated with this program is John Erickson and Brendan Fisher, who both live and work in the Gund. The Gund actually has just changed its name. It's now the Gund Institute for Environment. So we'll update this slide shortly, but they've long had a specialty in ecological economics. That's another area and a certificate that you could apply for if you're interested in getting that alongside of the graduate program. And then just recently, UVM offers a new certificate in agroecology taught by Ernesto Mendez and some of his colleagues. And there's a 3-credit 3-course, 9-credit bundle in agroecology that some of our students this year are taking with their electives as well, to again offer some area of specialty to go along with the leadership curriculum, which is really the majority of this program, is about leadership, which can be applied to any sector, any field. These are ways that you can dive more deeply into a specific sector and field.
And I'll just briefly add that you don't actually have to take above the credits that you're required to for the master's program, that as part of the 30 credits required for this degree, 9 of those are for electives. So these certificates would fit perfectly into the 2-year MSLS curriculum.
The last thing that we want to name is actually a really exciting development that's unfolded over the course of the last 6 to 8 months. It's called the Crossroads Leadership Lab. So a lot of graduate programs have an associated research lab that's associated with the graduate program, where various scientific research is being conducted to generate new knowledge that then informs the curriculum. The Crossroads Leadership Lab is our response to that. And rather than being a space where just pure research is happening, we talked to our affiliates for a long time and said, what kind of space would be the most generative space you could imagine to create new possibilities out of which new leadership practices and initiatives could be born. And the Crossroads Leadership Lab was born out of that, a sanctuary for endangered and emergent ways of knowing, learning, and leading. We work with a lot of our affiliates across the country to support their work and amplify the work that they're doing, and listen for new opportunities to explore new territory.
It's also part of the way that we think about designing for having a lifelong relationship with the students in the program,
Yes.
that it doesn't finish when the 2 years is over, but there are possibilities to support each other's work, to share, to amplify or shine the light on exemplary work that's being done by a student or an affiliate. And so it kind of increases the space for the learning community to have a longer life.
Which I think is so important to name. When we said relationship is at the center, we wanted to make sure that this wasn't just a 2-year one-off experience where after 2 years we no longer hear from or stay in touch with the students who have graduated from the program. We're interested in building a lifelong network of people who are doing innovative work at the intersection of social justice and multiple ways of knowing and ecological well-being and much more. And so the lab is one of the many ways, including a robust alumni network, an annual sustainability summit that we have every year that all alumni are always welcome to, that is attended by faculty and affiliates and current students. So we're really trying to continue to build the sense of being part of a larger network and community of folks who are doing intersectional work in exciting ways. So that's all we've got for this little presentation part of this. We'll turn off the presentation so that we can see your faces on our screen a little bit more fully. And invite you to unmute your mic if you want, which is over in the bottom left-hand corner. And would love to hear any reflections, comments, questions, anything.
Hi.
Hi.
For those I haven't met. And I've talked to Matt a little bit about this, but I was just wondering about some of the coursework that's at the core of the first year especially, and just what that looks like in terms of material that's being engaged with, or like you said, more hands-on projects that you'd be guided through.
Yeah. So the first year is basically a five-course sequence. We begin with a week-long residential course that happens in Shelburne, Vermont. Here's actually a program timeline that we'll share a little bit more about this. Emil's always like 2 steps in front of me. So that first residential course in the fall, it actually happens in the summer, in August, just before the semester begins, is the place where our core intention is about creating beloved community as deeply and quickly as we possibly can. So we spend 7 days together. We introduce a series of these practices.
It's the foundational pieces that we will refer to and build on over and over and over again in the course of the 2 years.
And you have the opportunity to both build deep relationship among the members of the batch. They like to call themselves batches rather than cohorts to avoid the military context, as well as deep relationships with the faculty and affiliates who are there. We usually have 5 to 6 affiliates who are there for significant periods of time. And we're exploring things like relationship to place, multiple incommensurate stories of place, awareness practices and deep systems thinking, personal sovereignty and what it means to actually be in and aligned with your unique core values and principles as you show up in every single moment. Relationship building and tending and protocols. How do you build relationship across difference, especially when those differences are multi-species differences? We're out on the land quite a bit, also in the water for those people who like to swim. It's a pretty glorious time to be in Vermont at that time. That residential ends and we go into a 15-week online course, which is the RED, the interactive online course, which is a series of 7 modules. Each of those modules features different professional affiliates who have helped to design that module, who will show up in a bi-weekly Zoom session just like this, who will provide feedback on the dialogue forum. And those modules include things like exploring sense of place, examining the Anthropocene, this time period that we're in that looks at things through deep time and changes our perspective on how we might show up. We examine worldviews, cosmologies, and ways of knowing. We do some work on design.
Creating internal conditions.
So there's this kind of arc of modules that highlight and feature different affiliates that build on each other and that are constantly inviting you to apply these various practices and ideas to your own home community and home organization. The dialogue forums, I will say I was really skeptical of the online situation when we started. But because we've spent 7 days together and we've talked about how we want to be communicating with each other, how we're going to practice inquiry with each other, I've never been a part of dialogue forums that are so generative. I get excited to go log on and see the unexpected directions that every group takes these essential questions and dives into them.
And the way that it's collaborative, the way that people are, that the wisdom is in the circle of people and relationships and not just people waiting for the instructor or the affiliate to weigh in.
Yeah.
It's really generative and actually builds deeper relationships.
And the modules themselves, I mean, year to year, they'll switch drastically. So I think some modules we've offered 3 times now, and through the student engagement on dialogue forums and the new essential questions that have emerged, the content gets shaken up, the nature of the module topic gets shaken up. So it's really an evolving, alive organism.
Yeah, we're usually messing with them until the day that we release them, because we're trying to respond to the questions that just grew out of the previous module and make sure that they're not disconnected in any way. So that's, and then I would also say that there's a lot of really rich content that is curated in each of those modules that include videos, readings, stories, art pieces. We're trying to engage in a lot of different forms of material for inspiration for the questions that we're engaging with. And if you're interested in seeing more, feel free to contact Emil and we can give you a little flash of what one of these modules looks like. There's usually way more resource material than one could possibly engage with over 2 weeks, but that's actually part of the self-organization and sovereignty. We want you to choose the things that are really alive for you and run with those. And those resources will always exist for you to return to if the time comes where you feel like, oh, I want to circle back to that series of pieces on cultural appropriation and awareness practice that I just didn't get to in the 4th module.
Then DC.
Then we go to DC. We actually just returned from DC with our 3rd batch of students. We spend a week there. DC is a particularly potent place to examine how history of oppression, domination, colonization, white supremacy, racism has played out in a place as a seat of power in this country, and through deep patterns of displacement and gentrification that are happening. We bring the same protocols for being in relationship with the place and the land that we used in Vermont to DC, and we explore DC as a place where the voice of that place can be part of our conversations about power, privilege, and catalyzing change. And then we dive into another interactive online course that has 7 more modules that build on that inquiry of power and privilege. So we're doing
power and privilege, decolonization, solidarity, relational leadership.
Yep.
And then we start moving into creativity, creativity, and what are the forces that we need in order to vision, to really vision a new future. And so we end on visioning on that interactive online.
And visioning might actually not be the right word for it. We sometimes refer more to as hearing the callings,
yes,
rather than using our own human will to say and impose on the world what we think ought to be imposed and said to the world. And we really hold off on listening for that calling until the very end of the semester, so that we can listen in a way where our awareness is expanded from the experiences that we've had together in that first year, to see what we can hear differently about what our gifts might be and how they might be in service to the world. And then born out of that is the vision and the calling that leads to the capstone project that happens in year 2. And there's a lot of support to take that on, but we also, I didn't. So after that, we take everyone to the Bay Area, which is a particularly robust intersection of really innovative, exciting intersectional initiatives that are happening, organizations that are embodying and manifesting so many of the practices that we're exploring. And so we spend half of the time talking about organizational manifestation of these practices, and the other half of the time remembering that organizations are the accumulation of the individuals and the relationships that make up those organizations. And so there's a really strong emphasis also on embodiment and remembering of the internal conditions that we create are going to be reflected in the organizations that we're participating in. And then from the Bay Area, there's some opportunity for some of these elective courses. And in year 2, the focus becomes the capstone experience that's supported with some great coursework around storytelling and professional communication for change, some sustainability seminars, and people start to differentiate more in the second year. People do a lot of independent studies that are an opportunity to go deeper into questions that they've been exploring, and they accumulate the coaching support teams to manifest the project that they want to do. And I'll just say one more thing about the project, and that is we really see the project as an opportunity to take a risk, to do something that you haven't done before, to imagine and listen for where you're called to go next, your kind of sacred next. And we want to provide the support for you to go out on a limb and to explore new territory in that project. And some of our students have done amazing things with that. They've started new organizations. They've run for state government with platforms of equity and justice. They've raised $120,000 for funds to do amazing things with their project. So that capstone can also be the stepping stone. It should probably be called the stepping stone rather than the capstone, to the next thing that you might see yourself doing. And our team, and I say our team writ large, is really there to support that vision that you have for where you're called to go. That's a long answer, Emma. Other questions?
Could we have access to your presentation? Yes, I will send that to you along with a recording of this too, for your records. What are some examples of capstone projects people have done?
Wow, they're so broad.
They're really diverse.
Because people come with such different interests from different fields and
different sectors.
Yeah. A few examples. One of our first year students did an amazing art installation and project that was about body politics. She interviewed people from different social and racial identities and constructed, after hearing their stories, constructed art pieces that told their stories in strength-based ways and as stories of survivance for people with different body types. Really powerful work that really enlivened her desire to awaken the creative part of what she does in the world. Xavier Brown, I referred to his project earlier. He raised over $120,000 to infuse a nonprofit organization that he had been dreaming called Soilful City, which does work around food justice and agroecology in the DC area. Incredible partnership building, working with formerly incarcerated folks to build resilient food networks.
And really working on food networks in food deserts in DC with communities, and really more catalyzing communities than driving communities, really just getting them invested in their own community and their own ability and the power to create food in their environment.
Yeah. We have had students, especially in the education realm, develop and really try and overhaul their organization to bring an equity lens to the work that they're doing, and to do so in a way that doesn't tokenize or continue to reflect the kind of relevance approach to educational diversity that is so common in organizations these days. Really trying to bring a cultural sustaining lens.
Colleen.
Yeah, do you want to talk about Colleen?
Yeah, we had a student who works in domestic violence who really wanted to bring a healing lens to the field and talk about what it would mean to connect the work both to the earth and to the idea of healing rather than punishment and incarceration. And
to move that field to not just focus on the experience of victims, but also the people who have perpetrated some of those harms, as part of a restorative justice approach to that work too. We could go on and on. I mean, we're into our,
we're just starting our capstone.
Exactly. So there's all these new projects that are bubbling up and beginning to take shape too.
Can you explain the timing of the year 2 summer trimester, and are the electives for any particular certificate program available each trimester? Yeah, so the certificates, they vary slightly in terms of when each course is offered. Both the ecological economics and the agroecology are 3 course clusters. And our recommendation for student work-life balance and all of that is that the second year be turned towards the certificates. And I think those course clusters start either in the late summer, I think in August for the agroecology, and then for the fall for the ecological economics. And then for the education for sustainability specialization, there's also a summer course that is offered actually every summer. So it can be taken either in your first summer, so in between your 2 years, or in your last summer. So the electives can be distributed. I think in that timeline it had an elective in the first summer, but you could easily switch that elective over to the last summer. That works better for timing. How do students generally pay for the program? Is there funding available?
Yeah, it's a great question. And you'll find on our webpage, there's a link on the left that's called something like finances, tuition fees, and we've really updated that recently. So there's a handful of ways that people pay for the program. One is that a number of our students are able to get their organization to provide some funding support for the program. Emil, in his fast computering, is actually pulling up the link here. So that's one way. We have actually quite a few scholarships that are available as well. We have an MSLS scholarship, which supports students based on both need and merit. We also have a multicultural scholarship that is available for students. We were able to, in the creation of this program, negotiate with the graduate college a reduced tuition because this is a low residency program. So actually out-of-state students pay significantly less per credit than students would in other programs. Because it also feels really important for us too to not offer a graduate program that you graduate from and are so in debt that you can't actually follow the calling that you're wanting to follow. It's probably more helpful to have this conversation individually, and Emil and I are happy to do that. Other ways that people get funding, we've had a number of students get external sources of funding, grants, fellowships that might be specific to your own field and sector, and we continue to amass a list of those that are available at that link. There's actually an Excel spreadsheet that lists a ton. So if you're in food, the food world, there's a suite of fellowships that you might be eligible for. If your work is around sexual and domestic violence, there's a suite of fellowships. If your work is, and we're constantly updating and adding to that list. And we've had a surprising number of students get money to cover their tuition costs through that process as well. Students also have raised money for their capstone project. Xavier being the most extreme, having raised $120,000 for his capstone project. And often that funding can also be used to offset tuition dollars and can be used as part of the financial support. And then, you know, the other thing that is also worth mentioning too is most graduate programs that are residential and funded ask people to leave their home community and come and spend 2 years doing a grad program in a place. They're often given a small stipend and an assistantship to work 10 to 20 hours a week alongside the 20 hours a week they do for their graduate program. One of the things we wanted to do is ensure that this program is, so as an alternative model, we said, what if we actually allow students to stay in their home community, not have to pay for the move across the country, and be able to work full-time? Because the work that they're doing full-time is often going to be able to support them much better than the small stipend that comes from a graduate TA-ship or a research assistantship. And so some students are able to, through their annual income, be able to offset some of the costs as well, because they're not having to stop work for the 2 years that they do graduate school. So that array of possibilities are kind of a combination of those things are usually play into the way that people fund their experience here.
And we have a comment. Am I pronouncing your name correctly? Imene? You can turn on your mic. I don't want to.
What? Say it again.
Imen.
Imen. Yeah. Comment. I'm amazed at the diversity of this program. Yeah, we're really excited about the diversity of this program. It's diversity in a lot of different forms too, not just race and gender, but also in terms of class and geography, professional experience and professional field. And one of the things that I feel like really makes this program rich and run really well is the diverse perspective. So you're not actually learning from people directly in your sector or your identity background, but you're actually learning across difference and from all sorts of different worldviews and ideologies.
Yeah. In fact, we were really honored that this last year, 2 different national academic magazines have picked up the program, in part because schools of environment and natural resources are notorious for being very white, non-diverse in a whole bunch of different ways. And the history of the environmental movement, of course, is a history of white supremacy and patriarchy and a lot of other things. And so the diversity and the emphasis on power and privilege has been noticed actually and is gaining a lot of nationwide recognition as being particularly unique in this country. Any other questions or comments, reflections back?
I actually, in the lens of diversity, found it interesting that there's so many women on the screen right now. Is that representative of the program, or are there more men? What's the kind of breakdown?
Yeah, in the 3 classes that we've had,
It's more women.
it has been more women. And, you know, to not kind of reinforce the gender binary too, we've had actually a number of people who don't identify on the gender binary as well. But we're definitely majority women in each of the 3 cohorts.
And in our pool of affiliates.
And in our pool of affiliates as well. And, you know, it's worth also naming that one of the other intentions of this program, if you look to the field of leadership development and you look at the gender and racial identities of most people who have published in the field of leadership development, it's very largely a white male field. And as such, a lot of the leadership theory that infuses how change is created reflects some significant unconscious patriarchy and white supremacy. And from the beginning, we said we really want the leadership practices to be grounded not only in the wisdom of nature, but also in the cultural wisdom of people who are not all white men.
And also people whose practices and experience come from leading their communities in acts of empowerment, survivance, resilience, in ways that point to a future of deep solidarity in the great going forward. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
What about the workload in general? What is the experience of people who work full-time and take this degree? How do they manage?
I would say 95% of the people who are in the program work full-time. Some have really heavy workloads.
And a good portion of them have families as well.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And that's part of what we're, you know, we mentioned this earlier, well-being is at the core. And so we don't want people to end this program depleted in energy. We want them to end the program, well, it never ends, but feeling inspired, full, overflowing, and a sense of abundance. You know, the workload we try to, as Emil said, keep it really steady and very predictable so that there aren't surprises where, oh, in the 14th week of the semester, you've got a group project and you're going to have to all of a sudden dump 20 hours into this group project during the week that you knew that for work you were going to have a especially heavy week. And so we try to be as transparent and forward-looking as possible. So if you say, actually, I have to travel for work in the last week of October, it's going to be hard for me to put much time in, we'll say, maybe we can get that module out to you a week early. You can work on it. We try to be as flexible as we can.
And a big piece of managing is communication. The sooner we know that there are challenges in the field for any of the participants, any of the people in the batch, the sooner that we can respond and try and find ways to help in the management. So it's really, you know, it's really about good communication.
Yeah, totally. Mm-hmm. It is pretty flexible. And Shandine, one of our very close affiliates, uses language that she describes as run to center. That if you're willing to kind of meet us and communicate with us, we'll run to center to meet you, knowing that we need to be flexible and there are times when we're trying to practice sovereignty together.
And it is flexible because in the first year, well, actually, I'm not sure about the second batch, but we have, because there seems to be an element of transformation, transition, and change that's just a part of people's lives going through this program. And so people have moved across the country. They have had babies. They have, you know, there have been all kinds of big changes in people's lives. And so we have found ways to respond to those changes and help them move through the program in a way that doesn't make them be paralyzed or have to drop out along the way,
right,
with those kinds of big transitions.
In fact, some people's capstone projects, I should have mentioned this, have involved quitting their job and finding the next thing that they need to do because of a discovery that actually the organization they're working in doesn't have the capacity to be able to address
the kind of
issues
change
of equity
that
or whatever
imagining.
they're after. And so their capstone project becomes support in finding the next thing that is really their calling in the world. And that becomes a really effective and meaningful project for them. So it's not as though they have to figure all that stuff out before they can work on their capstone project.
Yeah.
We don't advertise that on our website. 30% of people who take this program will quit their jobs. Any other questions or reflections?
Yeah, our pleasure.
Yeah.
Our information to get connected with us is on the website too. So feel free to reach out after this and be in touch. Glad to both email as well as Zoom or phone call.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And that's maybe one more thing that we could end on here is just to say that that making a decision to go to grad school is no small decision. And we're here to be supportive to that process. Emil and I sometimes joke also that one of our early phase conversations with people is to try and convince them not to come to this program. And the reason that we do that is we say, if you're not willing to really come with an open heart and willing to like engage in the deeper level inquiry, then we're not really, that's not what we're about. We want to attract people who really are circled up around our same intention. And if you're not willing to have what can be challenging conversations about difference and power and privilege, this may not be the program for you. It isn't the program for you. It may not be. And we're actually not interested in people who don't want to have those conversations. So we have Emil and I especially spend a lot of time in conversation with folks who are trying to decide if this is a right fit. And so please feel free to reach out as you're making decisions, as you're thinking about applying. We'd be glad to have one-on-one conversations. And because relationship is so central, we love the conversations and enjoy the opportunity to start the program already in relationship with people, not from the place of like, oh, who are these people who we just saw on paper?
What are the deadlines for applying?
The sooner the better. The official grad program deadline, I think, was last Friday. We'll begin the review of applications that are complete this month, and then we go on a rolling deadline process. So we limit the number of students in this program to 20 to make sure that we can really have intimate relationship be part of what's happening. And so when we hit 20, we just cut off, the application cycle closes, and we're not sure exactly when that will happen. But if you get your application in the next month, it will certainly be reviewed. So
yeah, and if you have extenuating circumstances where you actually need to put off the application a little bit later, but you have every intention on applying, it's good just to be in communication with us, because we can definitely like save spots and keep an eye out on what the enrollment numbers are doing. So once again, just keeping that close communication going is great. We would need to start in the fall rather than the spring. Yes, the first year and second year curriculum is really intentionally scaffolded around that structure that we laid out. So the first date is, I think it's July 31st is the start of the Vermont residential, and that goes to August 7th, I believe.
All right, y'all. It's great to see your faces. It's really nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Amaya, we see you just jumped on. I wonder if we got the time zones mixed up. We recorded this, so we'll send this along to you if we missed you here. All right. Farewell. Stay in touch, please.
Bye.